The silence in the first-class cabin of Flight 882 from JFK to London was shattered not by turbulence, but by a voice dripping with venomous entitlement. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation that cut through the pressurized air like a knife. A diamond-clad finger pointed accusingly at Seat 1A, trembling with rage. Cameras began to roll, capturing a moment that would soon ignite a global firestorm. What started as a dispute over legroom was about to spiral into a career-ending nightmare for a socialite who thought she owned the sky, proving that sometimes the person you berate is the one person you cannot afford to cross. The atmosphere inside the Delta One cabin was usually one of hushed reverence, a sanctuary of champagne flutes and lie flatbeds reserved for the elite. But today the air conditioning was fighting a losing battle against the heat radiating from Mrs. Beatrice Kensington. Beatrice, a woman whose reputation in the Upper East Side charity circuits was as formidable as her hairspray, adjusted her oversized Gucci sunglasses, even though the cabin was dimly lit. She clutched her boarding pass like a weapon. She had paid full fare over $10,000, and in Beatrice's world, that price tag purchased not just a seat, but dominion over her immediate environment. She stopped abruptly in the aisle, causing a traffic jam of passengers behind her, her eyes heavily lined and narrowed, fixed on Seat 1A. Occupying the seat was a woman who looked nothing like the demographic Beatrice was accustomed to seeing in the front row. Nia Brooks was young black and dressed in a comfortable nondescript beige tracksuit. Her hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and she was engrossed in a thick tablet, wearing noise-cancelling headphones. She looked peaceful, unbothered, and to Beatrice's discerning and prejudiced eye, entirely out of place. "Excuse me," Beatrice said, her voice starting at a conversational volume, but pitched to carry. Nia didn't hear her. She was reviewing a complex set of MRI scans on her screen, her finger tracing the delicate path of a cerebral artery. Beatrice huffed the sound sharp and loud. She reached out and tapped Nia's shoulder hard. Nia flinched, pulling her headphones down around her neck. She looked up, her expression confused but polite. "Yes. Can I help you?" "I think you're in the wrong seat, dear," Beatrice said, offering a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was the kind of smile a shark might offer before taking a bite. "This is first class. Economy boarding is back that way through the galley." Nia blinked, processing the rudeness. She glanced at the seat number on the cabin wall, then back at Beatrice. "I'm in 1A. This is my seat." "I don't think you understand." Beatrice chuckled, a dry, brittle sound. "The upgrades list was cleared 20 minutes ago. My husband Arthur Kensington, perhaps you've heard of Kensington. Enterprises is sitting in 1B. We specifically requested that Seat 1A remain empty for our carry-on luggage, or at the very least be occupied by someone compatible." Nia's brow furrowed. "Compatible, someone who understands the etiquette of this cabin," Beatrice said, dropping the pretense of politeness. She waved a hand at Nia's tracksuit. "We paid full fare. Employees flying on standby passes or lottery winners are usually relegated to the back of the business section, not the bulkhead." Nia took a deep breath. She had dealt with difficult personalities before. It came with the territory of her job. But she was exhausted. She had been on call for 36 hours straight before this flight. "Ma'am, I have a ticket. I am sitting in my assigned seat. Please let the people behind you pass." "Don't you dare dismiss me," Beatrice snapped, her voice rising. The other passengers were beginning to stare. A businessman in 2A lowered his newspaper. "I want to see your boarding pass. Now." "I don't have to show you anything," Nia said calmly, turning back to her tablet. "If you have an issue, speak to a flight attendant." Beatrice's face flushed a deep, blotchy crimson. She wasn't used to being told no. In her world, staff jumped waiters, scurried, and obstacles were removed with a quick call to a manager. This woman's refusal was not just annoying, it was an insult to the natural order of things. "Sarah," Beatrice barked, spotting the lead flight attendant organizing pre-flight beverages in the galley. "Sarah, get over here immediately." Sarah, a seasoned professional with 20 years of flying experience, stiffened. She knew Beatrice Kensington. Everyone on the New York to London route knew Beatrice. She forced a smile and walked over. "How can I help you, Mrs. Kensington?" "Check her ticket," Beatrice demanded, pointing a manicured finger inches from Nia's face. "She's refusing to move. She's obviously snuck up here from coach while you weren't looking. I want her gone. Arthur needs the legroom." Sarah looked at Nia, then back at Beatrice. "Mrs. Kensington, I boarded Ms. Brooks myself. She is in her correct seat. Please take your seat so we can finish boarding." "You're lying," Beatrice hissed. "Or you're incompetent. Look at her. She's wearing pajamas. She's probably some rapper's girlfriend or a affirmative action hire using a buddy pass. It brings down the entire ambiance of the cabin." The cabin went dead silent. The racism wasn't just an undertone anymore. It was out in the open, ugly and undeniable. Nia set her tablet down. Her hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of restraint. She looked Sarah in the eye. "Sarah, is it I'd like a glass of water, please? And I'd like this woman to step away from my personal space." "You don't give orders here," Beatrice screamed, slamming her hand onto the overhead bin. "I am a Platinum Medallion member. I personally know the VP of Operations." "You are a nobody. A seat filler." The confrontation had officially begun, but Beatrice had no idea she was picking a fight with a woman who held life and death in her hands every single day, and whose connection to this flight was far more intimate than a platinum card. The air in the cabin was thick, suffocating. Arthur Kensington, a man who had spent 40 years shrinking under his wife's dominance, buried his face in a Wall Street journal pretending to be invisible. He knew the drill intervene, and the wrath turns on him. Stay silent and pray it blows over. But it wasn't blowing over. Sarah, the flight attendant, tried to de-escalate. She stepped between Beatrice and Nia's seat, using her body as a soft barrier. "Mrs. Kensington, I need to ask you to lower your voice. You are disturbing the other passengers. Federal regulations require—" "Don't quote regulations to me," Beatrice spat. She spun around to face the cabin, seeking allies. "Can you believe this? We pay thousands of dollars for exclusivity, and they let just anyone in. It's unsafe. How do we know she's screened properly? She looks aggressive." The irony of Beatrice, who was currently veins popping red in the face, calling the silent Nia aggressive, was not lost on the passenger in 3C, a young tech entrepreneur named Leo. He quietly pulled out his phone and started recording, tucking it discreetly against his chest. Nia removed her headphones completely. She turned her body toward Beatrice. Her voice was low, controlled, the voice she used when telling a family their loved one might not make it through the night. "Ma'am, you have insulted my appearance, my intelligence, and my background in the span of 3 minutes. I am tired. I am trying to work. I suggest you sit down before you get yourself removed from this flight." Beatrice gasped, clutching her pearls in a gesture so cliché it would have been comical if the situation weren't so volatile. "Threatening me. Did you hear that, Arthur?" "She threatened me? She said she's going to have me removed." She leaned over Nia, invading her personal space. Listen to me, you little affirmative action charity case. I don't know who you slept with to get this seat, but you are out of your depth. I want you to pick up your trashy little bag and move to row 45 where you belong. If you don't, I will make sure you are blacklisted from every airline in this alliance. I will sue you for distress. I will ruin you." Naya didn't flinch. She looked at Beatrice's hovering face. "Are you finished?" "I am finished when you are gone," Beatrice shrieked. She turned back to Sarah. "Get the captain. Now I am not flying with this woman. Either she goes, or I'm calling my lawyer and the press. I want the captain to come out here and see what kind of riffraff you're letting into first class." Sarah's expression hardened. "Mrs. Kensington, the captain, is conducting pre-flight checks. I will not disturb him for a seating dispute that has already been resolved. You are in 1B. Ms. Brooks is in 1A. "Then I'm not sitting," Beatrice declared. She stood defiantly in the aisle, blocking the path of a mother trying to get her toddler to the lavatory. "I'm holding this plane hostage until the captain comes out here and handles this. I want him to look at her and tell me she belongs here. Go get him." She grabbed Sarah's arm, a distinct violation of federal law. Sarah pulled back sharply. "Ma'am, do not touch me." "Then do your job," Beatrice yelled. "Get the pilot. I want the man in charge, not the drink server." Inside the cockpit, the commotion had bled through the reinforced door. Captain David Brooks was running through the final checklist with his first officer Mark. David was a man of few words, known for his stoic demeanor and his precise flying. He was a former Air Force fighter pilot, a man who had landed planes in sandstorms and with failed engines. He didn't rattle easily. "Center tank pumps," Mark read out. "Check wall," David replied. "Captain," Mark said, pausing. He tilted his head toward the door. "Sounds like a war zone back there. Sarah's got a situation." David listened. He could hear the shrill, piercing frequency of a woman screaming. He heard the word trash and security. Then he heard a sound that made his blood run cold. He heard his wife's voice. It was soft, barely audible through the door, but he knew the timbre of it. "Nia." He set the checklist down. His jaw set in a hard line. "Mark, hold the checklist," David said, unbuckling his harness. "You're going out there, Cap. Usually we let the purser handle it until we push back." Mark noted, though he looked relieved he didn't have to go himself. "This is different," David said, standing up. He was a tall man, 6'2", with broad shoulders and graying temples that commanded instant respect. He adjusted his tie and put his uniform hat on, pulling the brim low. "That's not just a passenger she's yelling at." "Oh," Mark asked. "That's my wife," David said. He unlocked the cockpit door. The cockpit door clicked and swung open with a heavy mechanical thud that silenced the first few rows of the aircraft instantly. Captain David Brooks stepped out. He was an imposing figure in his uniform. The 4 gold stripes on his epaulets caught the cabin light shimmering with authority. He didn't look angry. He looked dangerously calm. His hat was tucked precisely under his left arm, and his eyes, steel gray and unreadable, scanned the scene before him. Beatrice Kensington, who had been mid-shout, froze for a split second before her face transformed into a mask of relieved entitlement. She smoothed her skirt, believing her savior had arrived. In her worldview, men in uniform were there to enforce the rules that kept people like her comfortable and people like Naya in the back. "Finally," Beatrice exclaimed, exhaling a puff of air that smelled of mints and nervous rage. She stepped around Sarah, effectively pushing the flight attendant aside, and approached David. "Captain, thank God. Your crew is utterly incompetent. I have been trying to resolve a simple seating error for 10 minutes and this stewardess has been threatening me." David didn't speak immediately. He stood tall, looking over Beatrice's head to where Naya sat. Naya hadn't moved. She was looking at her husband, her eyes communicating a silent apology for the trouble. David gave her the faintest, almost imperceptible nod, a micro-gesture of reassurance that only they understood. He then looked down at Beatrice. "What seems to be the problem, ma'am?" His voice was a deep baritone, smooth but firm, projecting easily to the back of the first-class cabin. "The problem," Beatrice said, gesturing wildly at Nia, "is that person in 1A. She is refusing to move. I have explained that my husband and I require the bulkhead for our privacy and comfort. Furthermore, she has been aggressive, rude, and frankly she doesn't belong here. Look at her attire. It's disgraceful. I want her moved to economy immediately so we can depart. I have a dinner reservation in London I cannot miss." David listened patiently, his face betraying nothing. He turned his gaze to Arthur Kensington, who was shrinking into his seat, trying to become one with the upholstery. "Sir, is your wife speaking for you as well?" Arthur looked up, startled. He glanced at Beatrice, who was glaring at him with eyes that promised hell if he disagreed. Well, we usually sit together. The legroom." Arthur stammered, his voice weak. "I am speaking for both of us," Beatrice interrupted, snapping her attention back to David. "Captain, why are we still discussing this remove her? Check her ticket. She's probably on a buddy pass or stole it. Just look at her." David took a slow step forward, entering Beatrice's personal bubble, just enough to make her step back. The power dynamic shifted instantly. "I don't need to check her ticket," David said softly. Beatrice smirked triumphantly. "See, I knew it. She's a stowaway. Get security." "I don't need to check her ticket," David repeated, his voice dropping an octave, becoming colder. "Because I bought it for her." Beatrice's smirk faltered. She blinked, confused. "Excuse me. You bought it? Is she your mistress? Is that it?" Oh, this is rich. The captain moving his little fling into first class while paying customers suffer. "I will have your license for this. Delta will hear about Mrs. Kensington." David cut her off, his voice sharpening like a blade. "I suggest you stop talking before you say something you cannot take back." "I will say whatever I want," Beatrice shrieked, realizing she was losing ground. "You are abusing your position. You are letting your girlfriend take a seat from a platinum member. It's corruption." David turned fully toward Naya. "Dr. Brooks," he said formally. "Are you all right?" Naya stood up then. She was tall, nearly 5'10", and despite her sweatpants, she held herself with a regal dignity that Beatrice could never buy. "I'm fine, Captain. Just ready to get in the air. The clock is ticking." Beatrice froze. Her brain tried to process the words. "Dr. Brooks. Captain." David turned back to Beatrice. The silence in the cabin was absolute. Even the air vents seemed to hold their breath. "The woman you have been harassing for the last 15 minutes, David said, his voice ringing with suppressed anger, "is not my mistress. She is my wife of 12 years. A collective gasp went through the cabin. Leo, recording in 3C, zoomed in on Beatrice's face, which was draining of color rapidly. "And she is not sitting there because of affirmative action or a buddy pass," David continued, his words hitting Beatrice like physical blows. "She is sitting there because I paid $7,000 for that seat out of my own pocket. And do you know why?" Beatrice opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked like a fish out of water. "Tell me why," Beatrice managed to squeak, trying to salvage her pride. "Why is she so special?" "Because," David said, leaning in close. "My wife is the chief of pediatric neurosurgery at St. Jude's Hospital. She is currently reviewing brain scans for a 6-year-old girl in London who has an inoperable tumour. Or it was considered inoperable until the Royal London Hospital called my wife this morning and begged her to fly over. She has been awake for 30 hours. She is flying to London to save a child's life." He paused, letting the weight of the revelation crush Beatrice. "She is wearing a tracksuit because she is going to scrub into surgery the moment we land. She is sitting in 1A so she can sleep and be sharp enough to operate on a human brain. While you were worried about your legroom and your ambience, she was worrying about whether a little girl lives to see her 7th birthday." The cabin erupted, not with cheers, not yet, but with murmurs of awe and judgment. The passengers turned their eyes from David to Nia, looking at her with sudden reverence. The businessman in 2A stood up and offered his hand to Nia. "Doctor," he said loud enough for Beatrice to hear, "I apologize on behalf of everyone here that you had to endure this. Thank you for what you do." Nia shook his hand briefly, smiling tiredly. "Thank you. I just want to do my job." Beatrice stood trembling in the aisle. Her narrative had collapsed. She wasn't the victim. She was the villain. She wasn't the elite. She was the nuisance. But Beatrice Kensington did not know how to lose. Shame was not an emotion she processed. She only processed rage. "So," Beatrice spat, her face twisting into an ugly sneer, "so she's a doctor. Good for her. That doesn't give you the right to embarrass me. I am still a paying customer. I demand you upgrade Arthur and me to a private suite if we have to sit near these people. Or better yet, move her. If she's so important, surely she can charter a private jet. Why is she cluttering up my cabin?" David's patience evaporated. He looked at Sarah. "Sarah, what is the status of the boarding door?" "Ready to close, Captain." Sarah said, her chin high. "And has Mrs. Kensington taken her seat?" "She refuses, Captain." David nodded. He turned to Beatrice. "Ma'am, you have 2 choices, and I am only giving you these choices because I have a schedule to keep and a wife who needs to get to London. Choice 1. You sit down in seat 1B. You put on your seatbelt, and you do not say one single word to Dr. Brooks or any member of my crew for the next 7 hours. If you even look at her the wrong way, I will divert this plane to Halifax and have you arrested." Beatrice's jaw dropped. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me," David said darkly. Choice 2. You grab your bag and you get off my plane right now. Beatrice looked around the cabin. She saw the phones pointed at her. She saw the looks of disgust. She saw the smirk on the flight attendant's face. The humiliation was burning her alive. She needed to hurt him. She needed to hurt them both. "You think you're so high and mighty," Beatrice hissed, stepping closer to David, her spittle flying. "You're just a glorified bus driver, and she's probably going to kill that kid on the table because she's too busy thinking she's a queen. I will ruin you. I know the CEO of this airline. I will have your wings stripped." She reached out and shoved David's chest a hard, physical push to emphasize her point. "Do you hear me? I own you." The moment her hand made contact with his uniform, the atmosphere shifted from tense to legal. "That's assault," the businessman in 2A shouted. David didn't stumble. He barely moved. But he looked down at where she had touched him, then back at her face. "Sarah, call the gate agent and tell them to bring the airport police. We have a passenger interfering with a flight crew member and committing assault on a captain." "No," Beatrice screamed. "I didn't. He walked into me." "I have it on video," Leo shouted from row 3. "Clear as day. She shoved him." "I have it too," said a woman in 4D. Beatrice looked around frantically. "Arthur, do something, they're ganging up on me." Arthur Kensington sat frozen. He looked at his wife, a woman who had belittled him in public for 30 years, who had alienated his children, who had made his life a misery of high society expectations and cruel insults. He looked at the captain, a man standing tall for his wife. He looked at Naya, a woman saving lives. Then Arthur did something he had never done before. He picked up his glass of pre-departure champagne, took a slow sip, and turned his page of the Wall Street Journal. "Arthur," Beatrice shrieked, "get up. We are leaving. We are suing." Arthur lowered the paper. "No, Beatrice," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "You are leaving. I am going to London." The silence that followed Arthur's declaration was deafening. Beatrice looked at her husband as if he had grown a second head. "What did you say to me?" she whispered. "I said I'm staying," Arthur said, looking her in the eye for the first time in a decade. "I'm tired, Beatrice. I'm tired of the yelling. I'm tired of the apologies I have to make for you. I'm tired of you treating waiters and staff and apparently surgeons like dirt. I want to go to London. I want to see the Tate Modern. I want to have a quiet dinner. You can go home. I have the credit cards," Beatrice screeched. "I control the accounts. Actually," Arthur said, a small, sad smile playing on his lips, "the accounts are in my name. The Kensington Trust is in my name. You have a supplementary card, and I think I'll cancel it while we're in the air." Beatrice let out a primal scream of rage, raising her hand to strike Arthur. "That's enough," David barked. He grabbed Beatrice's wrist in mid-air, intercepting the slap. "You are done." 2 large figures appeared in the galley doorway. Port Authority police officers, their faces grim. "Captain," one asked, "she assaulted a crew member, she is threatening passengers, and she is refusing to deplane," David said efficiently, releasing her wrist. "Remove her." "Let go of me." "Do you know who I am?" Beatrice wailed as the officers grabbed her arms. She kicked and thrashed her Gucci loafers, scuffing the floor. "I am Beatrice Kensington. I will buy this airport and burn it down, Arthur. Arthur, you coward." The officers didn't negotiate. They employed a professional drag, hauling her backwards down the aisle. Her protests echoed through the fuselage, a fading siren of entitlement. "Arthur, don't you let them take me. I'll divorce you. I'll take everything." As she was hauled through the curtain into the galley and out the jet bridge, the cabin broke into spontaneous applause. It started in the back of first class and rolled forward. Even the economy passengers who had heard the commotion started clapping. David stood in the aisle for a moment, adjusting his jacket. He took a deep breath, composing himself. He looked at Arthur. "Sir," David said, "are you sure you want to continue on this flight? It might be awkward." Arthur looked at the empty seat beside him. He exhaled a breath he seemed to have been holding since 1995. "Captain, this is the first time I've felt relaxed in years. Please fly the plane, and tell your wife. Tell her I'm sorry." David nodded. He turned to Nia. She had put her headphones back around her neck, but she was looking at him with shining eyes. "Go fly the plane, flyboy," she whispered, a small smile gracing her lips. "I have work to do." "Aye, aye, Doctor," David replied softly. He turned and walked back into the cockpit, locking the door behind him. 5 minutes later, the plane pushed back from the gate. But while the flight was peaceful, the ground below was beginning to burn. Leo, the tech entrepreneur in 3C, had connected to the in-flight Wi-Fi the second it became available. He didn't wait to land. He uploaded the 3-minute video titled, "Karen in First-Class Assaults. Captain Gets Owned by Husband. Justice." Carmen. By the time Flight 882 reached cruising altitude over the Atlantic, the video had 10,000 views. By the time they reached the coast of Ireland, it had 1 million. The internet is a fast-moving beast, and Beatrice Kensington had just served herself up as the main course. The video showed everything: the racism, the bus driver comment, the physical shove, and the glorious cinematic moment where Arthur sipped his champagne and ended their marriage. Hashtags began to trend. Beatrice Kensington, Marsh Seat 1A. Dr. Brooks, Arthur is free. But the internet sleuths weren't just watching. They were digging. And Beatrice had a lot of skeletons in her closet that were about to come dancing out. While Beatrice sat in a holding cell at JFK, demanding a lawyer and screaming at the booking officer, her phone, which had been confiscated, was blowing up with notifications she couldn't see. Sponsors for her charity gala were pulling out. The board of the Museum of Modern Art was convening an emergency meeting regarding her trusteeship, and a video from 3 years ago showing Beatrice yelling at a barista in the Hamptons was suddenly resurfacing, providing a pattern of behavior that the media devoured. But the real twist, the one that no one saw coming, was waiting for Arthur Kensington in London. Because Arthur wasn't just a passive victim. Arthur knew things about Beatrice's charity work that he had kept hidden to protect the family name. Now that the name was mud and the marriage was over, Arthur had no reason to keep the secrets. And he had 7 hours of flight time to think about exactly what he was going to say to the press when he landed. When the tires of Flight 882 finally kissed the tarmac at Heathrow, the sensation was more than just a mechanical deceleration. It felt like the entire aircraft was exhaling a breath it had held for 7 hours. The engines whined down to a low hum, and the seatbelt sign chimed off with a sound that usually signaled a chaotic rush for the overhead bins. But today, nobody moved. The aisle of the first-class cabin remained clear. There was no clattering of roller bags, no impatient shuffling. The passengers sat in a respectful, almost reverent silence, their eyes fixed on the cockpit door. They were witnesses to something rare, a moment where dignity had triumphed over volume, and they weren't ready to break the spell just yet. The cockpit door clicked open. Captain David Brooks emerged. He looked different than he had during the confrontation. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind the etched lines of fatigue around his eyes, but his posture remained military straight. He adjusted his cap, scanning the cabin, until his gaze landed on Seat 1A. Naya was already moving. She had switched modes entirely. The wife who had endured insults was gone. The neurosurgeon had taken her place. She was packing her tablet with efficient, sharp movements, her mind already visualizing the complex vascular structure of a 6-year-old's brainstem. David walked to her, stopping just short of the aisle. The professional distance between them was a necessary fiction for the onlookers, but the look in his eyes was intimate and fiercely proud. "Transport is waiting at the jet bridge, Doctor," David said, his voice low, but carrying clearly in the silent cabin. Scotland Yard has arranged a police escort to get you to the Royal London. You won't hit any traffic." Nia slung her bag over her shoulder, pausing to look up at him. For a fleeting second, her hand brushed his uniform sleeve, a touch so brief it was almost subliminal. "Thank you, Captain," she said. "I'll see you at the hotel, or are you flying back on the red-eye?" "I'm staying," David replied, his tone grim but resolved. "I have a feeling I'm going to need to make a formal statement to the local authorities regarding our passenger, and, I want to be there when you wake up." Nia nodded, a small, tired smile gracing her lips. She turned then, her eyes catching the movement in seat 1B. Arthur Kensington was standing up. The man who had boarded the plane as a shadow of his wife now seemed to occupy more space. He buttoned his suit jacket with a slow, deliberate calmness. He looked lighter, as if the atmospheric pressure in the cabin had physically scrubbed away 30 years of heaviness. "Mr. Kensington," Nia said, pausing in the aisle. Arthur looked up, startled to be addressed. He met her gaze, eyes that were kind, intelligent, and forgiving. "Good luck, Arthur," she said softly. Arthur smiled, and it was a genuine expression that crinkled the corners of his eyes, transforming his face from weary to hopeful. "And to you, Doctor. Save that child." With a final nod to the cabin, Nia turned and walked swiftly toward the exit. She was whisked off the plane, first bypassing customs through a diplomatic channel arranged by the hospital. She was a woman on a mission, the viral fame exploding on the internet, completely irrelevant to the life-or-death battle she was about to fight. Arthur Kensington disembarked last. He walked up the jet bridge, slowly savoring the solitude. He expected a quiet exit, perhaps a taxi to a hotel where he could finally sleep without Beatrice's snoring or complaints. He stepped out of the secure area and into the arrivals hall of Terminal 3. He was wrong. A wall of white light blinded him. The flashbulbs popped in a strobing frenzy, disorienting him for a moment. The British press, known for their relentless ferocity, had camped out in force. They didn't just want the story, they wanted the husband. They wanted the man who had sipped champagne while his wife imploded. "Mr. Kensington, Mr. Kensington, Mr. Over here, Arthur. Is it true? Are you divorcing her? How do you feel about the hashtag free Arthur? Did she really strike the captain?" Security guards moved in to create a wedge, trying to push him toward a waiting black car. But Arthur stopped. He planted his feet firmly on the polished floor. He looked at the sea of microphones and cameras, seeing his own reflection in the lenses. He thought of Beatrice sitting in a holding cell in New York, likely screaming at a public defender and blaming him for her predicament. He realized he had nothing left to hide. The secrets were hers, not his. "I have a brief statement," Arthur said. His voice was not the whisper of the man in seat 1B. It was strong, projecting over the din of the terminal. The reporters fell silent instantly, thrusting their recorders forward to catch every syllable. Arthur reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a printout of an email he had drafted somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean. His hands did not shake. "My wife, my soon-to-be ex-wife, is a complicated woman." Arthur began, choosing his words with lethal precision. "But today her behavior was inexcusable. I would like to publicly apologize to Captain Brooks, Dr. Brooks, and the entire crew of Delta Airlines. No one should be subjected to such indignity." He paused, looking down at the paper, then back up at the cameras. His expression hardened. "Furthermore, I have instructed my legal team at Sullivan and Cromwell to not only initiate immediate divorce proceedings, but to conduct a full forensic audit of the Kensington Family Charity Foundation. A collective gasp rippled through the press corps. Pens scribbled furiously. For years, Arthur continued, his voice dropping to a register of cold determination. I suspected that funds meant for underprivileged arts programs were being diverted to finance, personal luxuries. Today, I believe those suspicions are confirmed. As of this moment, I am freezing all assets associated with Beatrice Kensington. She will face the consequences of her actions both legally and financially. The flashes erupted again, brighter this time, illuminating Arthur as he turned and walked away. This wasn't just a breakup. It was a demolition. Arthur wasn't just leaving her. He was exposing the rot at the core of her lifestyle. He got into the waiting car, the door closing with a solid, satisfying thud that shut out the noise of the world. 3,000 miles away, the atmosphere was stripping Beatrice Kensington of her last shreds of delusion. The Port Authority holding cell at JFK was a stark contrast to the Delta One cabin. It smelled of stale coffee, industrial disinfectant, and old sweat. There were no lie-flat beds here, only a metal bench bolted to a cinder-block wall. They had taken her shoelaces. They had taken her diamond earrings. They had taken her dignity. Beatrice paced the small cell like a cut tiger. Her designer suit wrinkled her hair a disheveled mess. When the booking officer finally unlocked the door to allow her one phone call, she snatched the receiver with a trembling hand. She didn't call Arthur. She knew deep down that Bridge wasn't just burned, it was incinerated. She dialed the number she had memorized, the number of Sheila, her personal publicist and fixer for the last decade. Sheila had buried drunk driving incidents. She had silenced rude waiters. She could fix this. Sheila. Thank God, Beatrice screamed into the phone, her voice cracking with hysteria. Get me out of here. These animals have me in a cage. I want you to sue them, sue the airline, sue the police. I want that captain's head on a platter. She waited for the soothing reassurance for Sheila to say, Don't worry, darling, the car is on the way. Instead, there was a long, icy silence on the other end. Beatrice, Sheila said finally. Her voice was devoid of its usual sycophantic warmth. It sounded professional, detached, and final. I'm not your publicist anymore. Beatrice blinked, gripping the phone tighter. What are you talking about? I pay you a retainer of $10,000 a month. The agency has dropped you, Sheila said flatly. Have you seen the internet? You're toxic, Beatrice. You're trending globally and not in a good way. Sponsors for the gala are pulling out. The museum board just emailed they're convening an emergency meeting to remove you. I don't care about the museum, Beatrice shrieked. Get me a lawyer, get me out. And Beatrice, Sheila added, her voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a scream. The IRS just called my office looking for you. Arthur released the ledgers. They're asking about the travel expenses charged to the charity. Beatrice's blood ran cold. The phone slipped from her sweaty fingers. It swung by its metal cord, hitting the wall with a dull, rhythmic thud. The ledgers. She backed away from the wall, her legs giving out. She slid down the cold cinder blocks until she hit the floor. For the first time in her life, the silence around her wasn't because people were waiting for her to speak. It was because there was no one left who wanted to listen. Beatrice Kensington was alone. While the internet was still dissecting the chaos of Flight 882, a different kind of intensity was unfolding 4,000 miles away in London. The Royal London Hospital's Operating Theatre 4 was a fortress of sterile white tiles and humming machinery, a stark contrast to the velvet-lined claustrophobia of the airplane cabin. Dr. Nia Brooks stood over the small form of Sophie, a 6-year-old girl whose life currently hung by a thread no thicker than a strand of silk. Nia had been awake for nearly 40 hours. Her eyes felt like they were filled with sand, and her body ached with a deep, bone-weary fatigue. But her hands, her steady, brilliant hands, were rock still. The room was silent, save for the rhythmic beep, beep, beep of the cardiac monitor and the hiss of the ventilator. This was the silence Nia commanded. It wasn't the silence of intimidation that Beatrice Kensington demanded. It was the silence of absolute focus. "Scalpel," Nia whispered. For 14 agonizing hours, the drama of the outside world ceased to exist. There was no Beatrice, no viral video, no vindication. There was only the tumor, a dark, invasive mass, pressing dangerously against the child's brainstem. Every millimeter Nia cut was a negotiation with death. She worked through the exhaustion fueled by sheer will and the memory of Sophie's mother sobbing in the hallway. When Nia finally clamped the last vessel and removed the mass, the collective exhale in the room was palpable. She stepped back, peeling off her bloodied gloves, her hands trembling slightly now that the adrenaline was fading. "She's stable," the anesthesiologist said, his voice thick with relief. "You did it, doctor." Nia walked out of the scrub room, pulling off her cap. She found a quiet corner in the hallway, sank to the floor, and drank a lukewarm juice box. A passing nurse snapped a candid photo of her slumped against the wall, eyes closed, utterly spent, yet radiating a quiet, victorious power. That image, captioned simply, "The Real VIP," would soon grace the cover of Time magazine, a visual antithesis to the screaming face of Beatrice Kensington. Back in New York, the dismantling of Beatrice Kensington was not swift. It was a slow public flaying. The trial, held 6 months later, became the grim finale to her socialite existence. Beatrice entered the federal courthouse not in her signature Chanel, but in a modest, ill-fitting grey suit provided by her court-appointed defense attorney. Arthur had remained true to his word. The forensic audit of the Kensington Family Charity Foundation had been devastating. It revealed that for over a decade, Beatrice had treated the charity like a personal piggy bank. Funds earmarked for inner-city arts programs and pediatric health care had been funneled into private jet charters, spa retreats, and the very diamond jewelry she had worn while berating Nia. The courtroom was packed. Former friends, curious onlookers, and the press filled the pews. But as Beatrice looked around, she realized with a sickening lurch that she had no allies. Her friends were there to witness her fall, not to catch her. Arthur was notably absent. He had submitted his deposition and left the country, refusing to give her the satisfaction of a reaction. Captain David Brooks took the stand. He looked every inch the professional aviator, calm, precise, and unshakable. He didn't embellish. He didn't need to. "Mrs. Kensington didn't just assault a crew member," David told the jury, his voice echoing in the hush. "She attempted to weaponize her status, to strip a woman of her dignity. She endangered the safety of 300 souls because she believed the rules of physics and decency did not apply to her." Beatrice tried to weep, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue, but the jury remained stone-faced. The evidence was unsurmountable: the video, the financial ledgers, the testimony of the flight attendants. Justice Patterson, a formidable woman with eyes that seemed to see right through Beatrice's facade, delivered the final blow. She peered over her spectacles, the silence in the room heavy and suffocating. "Mrs. Kensington," the judge began, her voice low and steel-hard, "you have lived a life of unchecked privilege, insulated by wealth you did not earn and status you did not deserve. You believed that because you flew first class, you were a first-class human being. This court is here to correct that misconception. Beatrice trembled, her knuckles white, as she gripped the table. For the charges of interference with a flight crew assault and extensive wire fraud, I sentence you to 3 years in federal prison. Furthermore, you are ordered to pay full restitution to the charity, and you are hereby placed on the national no-fly list. You will not step foot on an airplane in this country again. The gavel banged a sound finality that shattered Beatrice's world. As the bailiffs moved in to handcuff her, the cameras flashed, capturing the look of a woman who had finally realized she was not the protagonist of the world, but merely a cautionary tale. 3 years later, the world had turned. In a small, dusty town in New Jersey, a woman named Beatrice stood by the automatic doors of a Walmart. She wore a blue vest that was slightly too large, and her feet, once accustomed to Italian leather, ached in sensible orthopedic shoes. "Welcome to Walmart," she mumbled as a family walked in. They didn't look at her. To them, she was invisible, just an employee part of the background. A woman in a rush pushed past her, clipping her shoulder with a cart. "Watch it," the customer snapped. Beatrice opened her mouth to scream, to demand a manager, to shout, "Do you know who I am?" But the words died in her throat. She knew exactly who she was now. She was inmate number 78402, released on parole, working for minimum wage to pay back a debt she would never fully clear. She swallowed her pride, a bitter pill she took daily, and looked down at the floor. "Sorry," she whispered. 4,000 miles away under the golden sun of Tuscany, Arthur Kensington sat on a weathered stone patio. The air smelled of rosemary and warm earth. He poured a glass of cheap, robust table wine and looked out over the rolling hills. He wasn't wealthy anymore. The restitution had decimated the Kensington fortune, but he was rich in ways he had never understood before. He lived simply in a small villa with Joyce, a retired librarian, who loved him for his quiet humor, not his bank account. Arthur picked up a copy of the International Herald Tribune. He smiled as he saw the headline on the front page. Dr. Nia Brooks appointed Surgeon General. The photograph accompanying the article showed Nia standing at a podium looking radiant and authoritative. Beside her stood David, now a senior Czech airman for Delta, his hair a little grayer, but his posture as protective and proud as ever. They looked like a team. They looked like people who had faced the fire and come out refined, not consumed. The story of Flight 882 was no longer just a viral video. It was a modern parable. It was discussed in business ethics classes and cited in legal textbooks. But for David and Nia, it was simply the day the world finally saw them clearly. Arthur took a sip of his wine, feeling the warmth spread through his chest. He thought about Beatrice, and he felt a fleeting, distant pity. She had spent her life trying to push others down to elevate herself. She never understood the physics of it all. Beatrice had wanted to be the queen of the sky, but she forgot the most important rule of flight: without lift you're just dead weight. And eventually gravity always wins. Arthur closed the newspaper, leaving the image of the captain and the doctor basking in the sunlight, while he turned his face to the Italian sun, finally and completely free. This story serves as a powerful reminder that money can buy a first-class seat, but it cannot buy class itself. Beatrice Kensington believed her net worth made her untouchable, but at 30,000 feet her mask slipped, revealing the truth. True nobility isn't found in exclusive memberships or designer labels. It is found in the quiet, steady hands of a surgeon saving a life and the protective integrity of a partner standing up for what is right. Beatrice's fall from grace proves that eventually the heavy weight of arrogance will always bring you crashing down, while humility and service provide the only true lift. The world may be filled with noise, but as Dr. Brooks and Captain David showed us, quiet competence always speaks the loudest. We hope this saga of instant karma and justice satisfied your craving for drama. If you felt that justice was served today, please smash that like button. It really helps the algorithm find more people who need to see bullies get what they deserve. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. I have one final question for you. Do you think Arthur should have tried to save his marriage, or was he right to walk away the moment the plane landed? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. Thanks for watching and, as always, fly safe.